This is James Mann, who is the Managing Director of West Station Developments Limited, part of the West Station Group of Maldon, who will introduce this video.
For a number of years, along with many other Maldon people, I had watched the sad demise of the old King's Head in the High Street. Then in early 1994, with the condition and the future of the building beginning to cause concern, I decided to purchase and rescue it. I had formulated a scheme that would, with complete restoration, not only restore but also provide a new commercial life for this ancient building that had served the people of Maldon for centuries. This video is a record of that rescue and the high standard of restoration and refurbishment that followed. Also, the many surprising discoveries that came to light. I hope you enjoy it.
It is June 1994, and the King's Head Maldon is a sad and sorry sight indeed. Neglected during recent years, and in a bad state of repair, plus a very uncertain future, it looked like the end of the road for this old inn that had served the people of Maldon for centuries. Nothing is more sad than to see a neglected building, especially one of the age of the King's Head, which to local people was thought to be a 16th century building, that is a Tudor building. Let us run our eye over the condition of this building. Rotting timbers, rotting window frames, the signs of general deterioration are everywhere. The question, therefore, in June 1994 was, could the King's Head be saved? The question on the lips of everyone in the town of Maldon. Local businessman James Mann of West Station Developments Limited felt that it could. Along with Lawrence Smith of Smith Construction, he devised a plan to strip out the building, to expose its timber frame, and to restore it to its former glory. Formidable task indeed. Much of Maldon's High Street dates back to the 16th century, with the original timber frames hidden by brick facades. The King's Head was an integral part of the town and its High Street for centuries, and was frequented by the leading citizens, and was at one time even the HQ of the Tory party in the 18th and 19th centuries. The King's Head was probably in its heyday during the Victorian era, as the local Dickensian characters sat around the Inglenook fireplace. Now this is a familiar sight to the many of the old customers of the King's Head. Here we see the bar in its original state before all the work began. This is relatively unchanged, perhaps for 100 years, maybe earlier. Stripping out commenced, the King's Head was about to give up one of its greatest secrets. This was not a building of the Tudor period, 16th century. It was in fact the remains of a Wealden house built in the 15th century, around 1450. It would appear that it was constructed at the same time as the Moot Hall opposite. This makes it one of the oldest buildings in Maldon. To put it into historical perspective, it was built only 35 years after the Battle of Agincourt. For the record, a Wealden house is a name given to the popular design of the 15th century timber frame buildings, mostly found in the Wealds of Kent and Sussex. This is the second found in Maldon's High Street.
Shop. So the sellers usually very often as part of the shop.
Here we see Dave Stenning from the Historic Buildings section, Essex County Council, examining the framework and the timbers.
It surprises me that that the beam is off centre over there.
Dave Stenning, an expert on medieval buildings, was very impressed with this discovery, so we listen in on his explanations.
There for a partition, so it was more than one chamber in the cellar. It's probably a barge board. That's the wood, the timbers on the gable of the building in 17th century. That will be 17th century. It's amazing how many of those survive in buildings. You find them in the roof very often, do you?
Yes, the joint above our head here is a joint where the tenon is more or less in the centre of the timber, projecting into the mortise. It's actually got a little tiny shoulder on it underneath. It's a little recess under it, which is a joint in that combination that's fairly generally in the 15th century. Without the shoulder on it, it can go earlier. It's the 14th century joint. I have just spotted the shoulders on them.
Here we see the original carpenter's marks made over 500 years ago. These were made to assist the medieval craftsmen in the assembly of the entire ceiling.
The roof in the centre of the building, next to it a window of 3 lights, 4 lights rather, with 3 diamond mullions. The window's still down at this level. Normal position for a window in buildings in this part of Essex, where they tend to keep the windows up against major structural posts. The window lighting the back room here, because there was a wall on this line which would have cut out light from the front of the building. The joint we have here is very much later than the ones we were looking at before. It is the one which we tend to call the soffit tenon with diminished form. In fact, the tenon here is off the soffit. The soffit is about a third of the way up the timber, and it's going into the beam. Above it, there's a sloping face on the mortise and on the tenon itself, and that strengthens the joint enormously. It was introduced in the early part of the 16th century. Here we have examples from the very end of the 16th century, if not the very beginning of the 17th. Partly you can tell that by the size of the timbers, particularly the fact that they're laid, they're narrower than they are tall, and that means that they've invented the idea, they've decided that it's much more sensible to put timbers that way around because they're stronger in that particular plane. And that was something that was happening during the 16th century. They gradually first become square, and then they start to get deeper.
Original big building.
Well, I think this was a separate, detached building behind
the front
yes.
line.
What its purpose it served, I don't know. It's obviously got 2 bays on the ground floor, 2 bays outside the stairs.
But the main access from the back is rather than the street then.
I think it was probably part of this property. Part of this property, so you probably got through. You could come through this wall here. There was an opening here, so you could come through it right yard at the back there. And it's a rather mysterious opening here, maybe a window, I'm not sure. First end wall of the building, down the high street, looking at the outside of it. Complete original wall of the timber framing of the 15th century, with as usual, the timbers are infilled with wattle and daub. The wattles, vertical wattles, and mud daub, which has been placed on the wall from both sides to give a smooth finish. And then we have this rather interesting Suffolk grey painting on it to give the effect of an arcade. It's a fairly common motif, a pretty popular one around about that date. It tends to indicate this room is an important room, and I suspect that this is the room that we normally give the name Solar to. It's a major upstairs room in the building. Probably wasn't used as a bedroom. It's the major private room of the owner of the building in the first place. It appears that the building was gabled on the outside because there were a row of pegs along the top to take a vertical gable on the end. The timbers that we see there now are replacements. They were put in when the building was extended up another story to make it 3 stories. So they're probably early 19th century, although there's obviously some reused timbers in there.
Yes, this is a reused windowsill or window head, and you can see again roughly the shape of a diamond here, which was the main, probably quite fancy mullions with mouldings and things on them. In between them we have a little mortise which had probably a wood or even an iron bar between each of the major ones to prevent people breaking in through the fairly wide opening between the major ones. And we have a little step in it here, which is very carefully contrived to fit glazing against. So this was a glazed window. It would have had a little leaded light window in there between each of the major mullions. The mullions themselves will have a little step in them to contain the glass. And beyond that point we have this moulded fascia, which is a little later in date than the one we looked at in the cellar. And it's probably the end of the 17th century, maybe even into the 18th century.
Well, we're standing on the first floor in the room over the parlour. So it's the opposite end to the solar, which is a slightly less important room, one thing, from the room at the other end of the building. Very big high beam, you can actually see it shaped with a camber on the top of it, as one would expect. And the roof, peak of the roof was over the centre of that beam. Great big posts coming down to the ground to support effectively the floor in the middle, to support the floor. We have a pair of braces probably, these curving timbers, which start at the post and run down and stop against that particular stud there where it's pegged in. And this is a normal sort of Essex pattern. You have a pair of these braces either side of the post at ground floor and first floor. Here we only apparently have them at first floor. There's quite a lot of charring and blackness underneath this beam, which appears to be the soot from the open hearth of the fire, which has leaked through the wall in the past. Not probably a fire, but just the smoke from the open hearth. Above it all, there's a little peg and a mortise here, which carries the vertical timber in the middle to support the roof, the crown post. That would have risen up and would have had a brace curving out in this direction to carry a long timber right the way down the whole length of the building, supporting this upper part of the roof. There doesn't appear to be any more pegs along this, but it does appear that the building was open. There was open air between the hall and the upper part of this chamber. Nothing to stop the smoke from the hearth actually blowing across the top of the roof, and maybe out through a gable at the other end of the building. Yes, we're in a little building at the rear of the frontage range, which consists of a single room on the ground floor and a single room on the first floor. Difficult to know quite what purpose it serves. The carpentry is really quite high quality. It is at the very end of the 16th century. They've used an ingenious technique which became popular in the 16th century in the middle, which is an A-frame. That is, that the rafters are really make a triangle, and they have a big beam across the middle, a collar, which holds them in position. It means you can walk underneath the collar. There's no tie beam to obstruct the headroom, and we have purlins along the side, long timbers that run all the way down the length of the building to support the rafters. Despite that, they bowed, as they almost always do to some degree, and with little wind braces on the corners, which you find on all four corners of the building, which, as one can see, there's almost always happened with them at this stage. They buckle wonderfully. They buckle in the middle, but they are to make the building more rigid. Very interesting piece of brickwork at the far end of the building. We were looking at the floor earlier. This late 16th century, early 17th century floor. At that same time, they put a skin of brickwork, just one brick thick, on the end wall. Probably the old timber frame was still there behind this wall. Maybe it's all disintegrated and disappeared now, we don't know. But they put it in, and they put this piece of wood in here to take the end of the floor. And originally, that floor timber fitted into that mortise there. So you can see there's been two stages of raising the floor. The floor was here, then raised to there, then raised up again. And this is the front of the brick wall. One can tell it's the front because there's little bricks in here which are called closers, which mean you've almost got to the end. They're the spacer pieces to get to the end. So at the stage this was built, this was the outside wall of the building, and you can see the timber ran and stuck out into space. So they were still keeping a jetty, an overhang on the front of the building. And they put this one in to support the jetty on the end. And it goes together with this floor above us as a 17th century jettied rebuild.
Plans were made to transform the King's Head, now established as a 15th century building, into an exciting commercial venture, which would include a restaurant, wine bar, and various retail units, yet still retaining many of the period features. Such was the interest shown by local people in this project, James Mann decided to have open days to introduce the interior and current restoration work to the people of Maldon. Part of the essential and sensitive work was the cleaning of the ancient woodwork, by graphite blasting, a more gentle method than sandblasting, thereby removing 500 years of dirt and grime. The exposed brickwork was also cleaned and restored, along with doors and frames. And of course, extensive wood treatment was undertaken of all timbers to protect against future woodworm, dry rot, and of course the dreaded death watch beetle. The first opening day was a resounding success, as local people viewed for the first time the original timber frame of 1450 and the additions of later centuries. A true insight into their heritage for the people of Maldon. As you would expect, this project, one of the most exciting in the town, for years attracted the interest of the media, with television and press coverage. Even the BBC were fascinated by the discoveries at the King's Head and sent along their reporter to interview James Mann. We all know the joy of taking down an old wall, an interior wall, and finding lots of little discoveries which have never been seen before. But here we have a little treasure trove of the discoveries found in the walls of the King's Head. But this is only the beginning, for there is still much delicate restoration work to be done. One of the more serious problems encountered was the deterioration of an important load-bearing plate, which was to be cut away and replaced. The adjoining timbers were so hard that cutting through the nails was found to be much easier than cutting through the 500-year-old oak itself. One of the most interesting features in a period property such as this are the original fireplaces and brickwork. With such a professional restoration program, all the relevant building regulations had to be followed strictly. And here you see a special mesh applied to strengthen and bond the brickwork together. One of the treasures of this ancient building is the delightful inglenook fireplace, now fully restored. Here exposed to the light of day for the first time since the 16th century, the bricks are covered in centuries of grime and plaster. Not a pretty sight, yet with delicate treatment, cleaning and repointing, they return to their original glorious warm colours. With full restoration, the old fireplaces become alive once again, catching the eye as you wander through the rooms. Today, the 20th century craftsmen emulate the work done by their 16th century counterparts as they repair and rebuild sections of the fireplaces and walls. advantage of today's modern building practice over the medieval period is the use of glass fibre insulation material. Here being installed to meet current regulations, retaining heat and also giving sound protection. I wonder what the Tudor craftsmen would have made of it all. Anyone owning a period property today will know the difficulties involved of cutting plasterboard to fit beams of various widths. And here at the King's Head Centre, it was certainly a major exercise. Building, we see the amount of work done on the brickwork and windows to create small and attractive retail units. Cleaned and raked out before pointing, the soft red bricks aligned to the specially made windows give a welcoming effect to this entire area. By early November, the first retailer, a picture framing craftsman, has moved into one of the units in this Maldon's first shopping muse at the King's Head Centre. This only 5 months after looking at a derelict building, James Mann of West Station Developments has his first retail unit fully operational.
With you then. I've had a tour around. It's obviously an incredible building. Obviously some of it's going to have to be covered up, isn't it, to turn it into a wine bar, restaurant and so on?
Well, yes, but I believe Mr. Mann intends to expose and show most of the woodwork, stud work, which is what gives a building its ambience and feeling. And in fact, the restaurant area, which will be a garden restaurant with a glass roof, will be most attractive indeed. And adjoining this will be a wine bar. And again, this is something which the business community badly needs in this area. In fact, as James said, this will be an asset to the town of Maldon.
Presumably you must have put a considerable investment into a project like this.
Yes, it's been very considerable. We've had assistance from the local bank, etc. But it is somewhat considerable.
And I suppose in a way, as the investigations have gone on and more history's been revealed, that the building's got far more interesting, has that added to its value for you and for any future owners?
It certainly put the costs up and hopefully it put the value up.
It is now Christmas 1994 and the town is celebrating its famous Victorian evenings, with many people dressed in period costume. The King's Head Centre, the focus of attention during the evening, is now almost complete and ready to play its special part in the festivities.
evening on the 8th of December 1994. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year. God save the Queen!
No, they're fine. Carry on.
The King's Head Centre building has become alive once again as it graces the High Street, as in times past.
Have you bought?
By the summer of 1995, we see the final stages of the Shopping Mews courtyard with its terrace and interesting small retail units. Attracting the attention of a visiting school party is the last surviving car manufactured by Bentles of Heybridge, kindly lent by Edward Bentle of Kingston, a descendant of that famous family of Heybridge. In order to celebrate this final stage of restoration, James Mann entertains various VIPs and business people of Maldon to lunch on the new terrace. The transformation of this part of the building is quite staggering as we see these before and after images. This is indeed a triumph of restoration, as this once derelict building takes on a new life. Such creative work needs to be recorded for posterity in order to be seen by the people of Maldon, now and in the future. This interior scene of desolation has now become an Italian garden restaurant and wine bar, one of the most popular venues in Maldon. Once again, we see the Inglenook fireplace, excitingly discovered and now fully restored, gracing the special little gift shop. Certainly a shop with a difference. And here, another part of the ground floor, which dates from 1450, has been transformed into an attractive fine food shop, yet still retaining that period ambience. We now move to the upstairs rooms, which again have been fully restored and refurbished. Here we find the body studio, which has been designed to fit into its period surroundings. And here is one of life's modern facilities, a fully equipped modern apartment. Those original tenants of the 15th century would never have believed it. The once derelict outbuildings of the old King's Head were painstakingly redesigned and refurbished, using the same soft red bricks. Now overlooking the attractive Mews terrace, they house a collector's paradise of the old and antique. Maldon is of course ideal for buying those old prints and paintings, and here with a first-class framing service you can choose the perfect frame. It is now over 500 years since the first timber frame building was erected on this important site in Maldon's High Street. Today, late in the 20th century, the King's Head Centre has once again taken its place as a focal point and symbol of the town's ancient heritage, and still reflecting the high standard of service over the centuries. We should remember that without the sympathetic foresight and investment by James Mann and the West Station Group, this fine building could have been lost to this and future generations.